leader of the Republican Party and the America First movement. And that America First movement, his, just like the one that preceded it, 85, we have to be clear-eyed about that in this moment in time. And so that vote isn't surprising. Donald Trump is in Mar-a-Lago. He is regrouping. He's made his first endorsements. He's opened up his former office. We'll see what their next move is. But these Republican senators will not be able to look away from what happened. And what happened was incited to violence by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, a horde that consisted of white supremacists, white nationalists, fascist Proud Boys, extremist militias, violent and murderous thugs stormed the Capitol of the United States. They bludgeoned to death a policeman. 6 people were killed. During that violent attack on the Capitol of the United States, the American flag was ripped down. The MAGA flag was raised in its place, raised over the American flag. The floors of the Senate and the House of Representatives were desecrated. A constitutionally mandated function was interrupted on purpose on the basis of a big lie that those members like Hawley, like Cruz, not only were complicit in, were the fathers of. And so that incited mob pain, and it came for the purposes of denying the franchise in part to millions of black voters who had decided to change course from the Trump presidency. And after that attack, 7 senators, 140 House members voted, in essence, to throw out millions of black votes to install the loser of the election as the winner, to make the loser the dictator, and end the American Republic. That was the consequence of that vote if it had succeeded. So no, this was weeks ago, not years ago. There is no moving on from this. This is why corporate America, big company after big company, Google today, has said no more donations to you, the Sedition Caucus. And so what we see is a desire for fantasy, a desire for delusion, to turn away from the desecration of the Capitol incited by the president, the second branch of government attacking the first. There will be accountability in this country. There will be justice in this country, and it won't just be for the incited, it will be for the inciters as well as this plays out. A disappointing vote, but not surprising, but one much less grounded in reality than a fantasy that they believe wrongly that they can push away.
And Matt, rocket. I certainly do hope that.
Yeah, I can't blame you. 3 times through this gets a little repetitive. Ashley Dawn Flowers, the Insignia Hair Salon Manager in California, now open for business, she hopes permanently. Let's get to read all of this for Dr. Anesh Adalja, the Johns Hopkins Senior Scholar, Infectious Disease Specialist. Doctor, always good to have you. This trend right now that's shown noted improvements in the number of cases, indeed the number of people who are diagnosed with a positive case has also ebbed a little bit. What do you think's going on behind the scenes?
I think we're seeing a little bit of a plateauing right now, that people are getting better at wearing face coverings. We have a vaccine rollout going where you're seeing nursing home residents get highly vaccinated, at least better than the general population, as well as just sort of the ebb and flow of cases. And it does, initially I thought that this wasn't going to be sustained. I was worried it wouldn't be sustained, but it does look day after day that we are seeing a real downtick in cases, a downtick in hospitalizations. And I think that when you think about public health measures, they always have to be tied to metrics.
Actually review all of the evidence that there is.
House impeachment managers say they're still considering whether or not to use witnesses to try their case. But, you know, the senators themselves all saw what happened. Many of them saw it from inside the Capitol, and many of them still will not blame Trump. Do you think more witnesses, more evidence would change minds, or are people's minds just locked down at this point?
Well, if their minds are locked down, then the American people deserve to see that they have elected senators on that side of the aisle who refuse to look at the evidence, who are so former President Trump's camp that they're not even willing to do their constitutional duty, and it's shameful. As I said, I am sitting in an office where there is still broken glass on the floor, where there is still plywood boarding my window up right here, where my door has marks from a battering ram of some sort that they use to try to force that door open. I can show them the evidence myself. I'm happy to show it to my colleagues, but first they need to listen to the evidence and not close their minds to it.
The House impeachment managers are also weighing if and how to incorporate video into their case. Sources tell us that the impeachment managers are thinking about using some of this footage gathered by just security. Take a listen.
Yes.
Invade the Capitol building. Let's take the Capitol. Take the Capitol. Take the Capitol. Take the Capitol. Take the Capitol right now.
Just to be clear, because I don't know if you even saw that as opposed to just heard it, you hear President Trump in that clip saying, "You'll never take back our country with weakness, you have to show strength." And then you hear people in the crowd saying, "Invade the Capitol building, take the Capitol, take it, take the Capitol right now." What's your response?
Well, my response is you take that video and then you take and you look into the fact that the president did not try to stop or tell the insurrectionists to cease their attack on the Capitol until well after the attack was well underway, and even then it was a half-hearted statement. It's clear that the insurrectionists were doing exactly what the president wanted. Once he saw what was happening, he still didn't come out and ask them to stop and go home, not for a long time, and even then it was a half-hearted attempt. So it's very clear that they were carrying out exactly his wishes.
Thank you so much, Senator Tammy Duckworth, Democrat of Illinois. Always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Breaking news about the spread of the coronavirus that could impact every parent whose kids are doing virtual learning. Then, does this MAGA terrorist attack on our nation's capital look staged to you? Of course it isn't, but that's the official position of Republican state officials in one part of the country, and they are not alone. Stay with us.
What's my safe flight story? I spent a lot of time.
The federal government would have no role. States were on their own. Let me play some of that sound just to remind everyone sort of where we were 7 days ago.
The notion of the federal stockpile was it's supposed to be our stockpile. It's not supposed to be state stockpiles that they then use. So we're encouraging the states to make sure that they're assessing the needs, they're getting the data from their local situations, and then trying to fill it with the supplies that we've given them.
We're in very strong communication with the governors. We're going to be helping with testing. They're going to be doing the testing. It's got to be a localized thing, and it really has been since I've been involved, because I came in and federal government's supposed to do testing of parking lots in the middle of a certain state that's 2,000 miles away. It's ridiculous. But the testing has been so incredible.
So just to be precise here, Jared Kushner was talking about PPE, Donald Trump was talking about testing supplies, but these were the challenges at the time, and the federal government, the White House, under the previous management, made abundantly clear that it had no role in helping states. Just talk about what the effort is like to scale up the federal role and begin to be not just helping the states, but providing the states with what they need to combat the virus.
Yeah, a couple of things, Nicole, and it's kind of a little bit of pulling back that black curtain that the Trump administration left and the Biden administration inherited. I mean, from a policy standpoint, down to like understanding exactly what Pfizer and Moderna are shipping out and exactly where it's being received in the states, how much of that is being allocated to long-term care facilities. A lot of what's happening around the country is that vaccines are being distributed to states, and you can look on dashboards around the country that they're not all being used, and people, even states, don't exactly know where their own supply is going. So from a federal kind of standpoint, they have to come in, assess exactly what the status currently is, inheriting already that some 50 million doses have been kind of distributed by both manufacturers, then trying to understand, remember, manufacturing, these are complex vaccines to put together, so you can't just build a factory overnight. So they're trying to work on where the feds can step in from a policy standpoint and help make more syringes that can extract more vaccine out of a vial. And then the allocation across the United States, you get into really hard problems to solve. New York is ready to get more, but we know that we need to get more to another state because they actually haven't had that much in the first place, and the allocation was inequitable. Or for a third of your kids.
19 has had an impact on American energy producers because demand has dropped precipitously.
Social Security check each month, but Bill doesn't. And why does Mary get 30?
Appropriate. We can't ignore the fact that this has not happened in the history of the United States, but for a British invasion in 1813. This is a serious matter. It should be taken seriously by the Republicans as well as the Democrats.
You even heard President Biden yesterday suggest he doesn't believe there are 17 Republicans are going to vote to convict the president of this one article of impeachment. Do you agree with President Biden?
I don't, Joe Biden's a good vote counter, but he's not been on the Hill for a while. I'll just say to Joe, to the president, you may be right about this, but I want to tell you something. If there was ever a moment in history 3 weeks ago when everybody ought to sit up and take notice that a domestic terrorist group tried to overtake the government of the United States during the electoral vote count, that is as serious as it gets, and we ought to take it seriously.
I want to move on, but 45 Republican senators voted today that they don't even think it's constitutional to go and have a trial of a former president of the United States. Let's talk about the House impeachment managers. They're preparing for the possibility, I understand, of having no witnesses in the trial, but they will rely on a lot of visceral evidence, including video evidence. So you think that strategy will be enough to convince 17 Republicans to join potentially all 50 Democrats?
I can't tell you what will convince the Republicans, but this much I'll tell you. There are 100 senators sitting on the jury of Donald Trump for this second impeachment that he faces. And I want to tell you, we're not only jurists, we were eyewitnesses to what occurred. And when it gets down to it, I think every passing day we're going to find more evidence of wrongdoing and connections with organizations that, frankly, we're not visiting town here just to pick up a new flag or a new bumper sticker. These folks had an idea and a plan, and they were trying to execute it. One Capitol policeman was beaten to death in the halls of the Capitol. I want to take this as seriously as it merits, and it merits this consideration at the trial.
Let's talk about the #1 issue facing the country right now, the life and death issue, the coronavirus pandemic. You say, Senator, that there's very limited time to try to get Republicans on board with another COVID relief plan. Are you potentially sacrificing an agreement on that issue by holding this impeachment trial in 2 weeks?
No, I think that America understands what we're faced with, a deadly pandemic that has claimed over 400,000 lives. And it's in some parts of our country, it's worse than it ever was. Joe Biden has been in office for all of about 1 week now. He has seen that the vaccine distribution, which we were counting on to break the back of this pandemic, never really materialized under the previous administration. He's doing his best. When he came into office, we had more vaccine in freezers than we had in the arms of Americans. And we've got to change that and do it dramatically and do it fast. And I think the Senate should respond to this need as quickly as I've just indicated, the American people realize. We have to get this vaccine out and about. We've got to restore this economy and get the kids back in school. We can waste no time.
To eliminate co-pays and
Okay, thank you, Emily. Coming up, a new lawsuit invokes a police reform law, which was specifically passed after those large protests after the killing of George Floyd. Children detained on video. We have a special guest, and I'm telling you, this is one of those important stories far outside of Washington that you need to know tonight. Also, new reports on the arrests coming out of that riot. But first, President Biden making a major announcement on why he says the government, state and federal, can make you safer and get vaccinated. That's next.
thing you're entitled to.
Mr. Cornyn.
redesign an entire room from floor to ceiling.
Years. I happened across Dr. Mann. She has changed my life.
Shop everything home at Wayfair.
5 to 7. It's new.
Jobs for all Americans. Economists have estimated that the U.S. economy has lost a staggering $16 trillion over the last 20 years because of discrimination against families of color. If we closed racial gaps in income and opportunity, these same economists have estimated we could add $5 trillion to the U.S. economy over the next 5 years and add over 6 million new jobs for all Americans. So building a more equitable economy is essential if Americans are going to compete and thrive in the 21st century. We've hit
approved benefits, including dental, vision.
The Senate has confirmed the president's pick to be the nation's top diplomat. Anthony Blinken was approved by a 78-22 vote to be Secretary of State. All of the no votes came from Republicans. Senators have been sworn in for the second impeachment trial of former President Trump.
Do you solemnly swear that in all things appertaining to the trial of the impeachment of Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, now pending, you will do impartial justice according to the Constitution and laws, so help you God?
The procedure was led by Vermont Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy, who as President Pro Tem of the Senate will preside over that trial in a move that signaled just how hard it could be to get a conviction. Shortly after being sworn in, Republicans forced a vote on a resolution declaring the trial illegal, led by Senator Rand Paul. 45 Republicans supported that. Democrats need 17 Republicans to vote to convict former President Trump. A short time ago, we should mention, a spokesman for Senator Leahy said he was taken to a local hospital for evaluation after complaining of not feeling well. We wish him well tonight. The more than 3,000 members of the D.C. National Guard currently in Washington, D.C. will be extended through the end of March. A National Guard spokesperson has confirmed.
Keeping pace with constant growth. Keeping you comfortable with clean, reliable energy.
And digital reporter Eric Meyer on the first 3 weeks of the 2021 legislative session in a KELOland.com original online report right now.
Well, there's a new leader of the South Dakota Supreme Court. Chief Justice Stephen Jensen took over on January 5th after the state's longest-serving Chief Justice retired. Coming up in tonight's Eye on KELOland, we'll talk with Jensen as he settles into his new role.
And finally, the fifth thing, Janet Yellen has made history after being sworn in as the nation's 78th Treasury Secretary and the first woman to hold the office. She was sworn in today by Vice President Kamala Harris. The ceremony was performed outside on the east landing of the White House with a view of the Treasury Department.
And let's get one last check of our weather with meteorologist Adam Rutt.
Oh, you want to bundle up tonight with lows in the single digits and a few sub-zero lows not out of the question in northeastern parts of KELOland. Teens and 20s eastern for highs on Wednesday, but to the west, we make it into the 30s and 40s.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a great evening.
Tonight, President Biden's ambitious new pledge to buy enough doses to vaccinate all Americans by the end of the summer. The new plan tonight, ordering an additional 200 million vaccine doses and increasing the supply to states immediately.
This is a wartime effort.
Plus is a new vaccine with just one dose about to be approved. And the new evidence tonight that an antibody drug can temporarily prevent COVID-19. Opening our schools. The CDC urges getting children back in the classroom, saying with precautions, in-person learning is safe. Plus, Germany requires surgical-grade masks in public. Could that happen soon here in America? Admission of failure. In an extraordinary apology, the acting head of the Capitol Police admits they knew white supremacists and militias were coming to the U.S. Capitol armed. This as senators are sworn in for the trial of former President Trump. Putin phone call, what President Biden said to his Russian counterpart. More than 150 now facing federal charges, including this New York man seen smoking a joint inside the Capitol. And there's this stunning video of the Trump rally before the riot.
Let's take the Capitol!
Deadly storm. A tornado slices through Alabama, killing a 14-year-old, injuring more than 24, causing extreme damage to homes, hotels, and neighborhoods. And a lesson in dedication. The teacher who logs into class every day, even during cancer treatment.
This is the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell, reporting from the Capitol.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We're going to begin with breaking news because President Biden says the U.S. is buying 200 million more doses of those 2 approved coronavirus vaccines, giving the government enough shots by the end of this summer for all Americans to get vaccinated. Tonight, Mr. Biden also says he's immediately increasing the number of vaccines that the federal government is shipping to states and will now give governors detailed information about future shipments on a 3-week schedule. The president's plan comes on the heels of widespread anger from Americans unable to get vaccinated and after complaints from states that they're running out of shots and canceling appointments. President Biden called the vaccine rollout one of the most difficult operational challenges the country will ever face, in part because current vaccines require 2 shots. Well, tonight the CDC says about 44 million of those shots have been already given to states, but fewer than 24 million of them have actually been put in people's arms. That's because some states and hospitals are holding doses back, trying to make sure that they have enough to give those second shots. Still, the president says it will take months before enough people are vaccinated to make a real dent in the pandemic, and that Americans must keep wearing masks and social distancing. At the same time tonight, new research from the CDC says there's enough evidence to show that masks and social distancing may be enough to immediately start reopening schools for in-person learning. So as you can see, there's a lot of big headlines tonight. Our team is standing by to cover them all. CBS's Nancy Cordes is going to lead us.
Those additional doses from Pfizer and Moderna ordered, but he said it will take time to get them and then get them out. Talking about FEMA helping with mass vaccination sites and hundreds of millions of Americans able to get vaccinated by this summer. Governors welcoming the news tonight, but adding that the rate of the vaccine still is just not fast enough. Long lines tonight in many places across the country. These images from Chula Vista, California. And late today, Vice President Kamala Harris rolling up her sleeve for her second Moderna shot, hoping to reassure Americans and urging them to get the shot when they can. There is also news tonight, new guidance from the CDC on whether to open more schools. And ABC's Stephanie Ramos leading us off.
After weeks of frustration over a slow vaccine rollout and desperate calls for more supply, the president saying help is on the way.
We will both increase the supply in the short term by more than 15% and give our states and local partners more certainty about when the deliveries will arrive.
The Biden administration now promising to buy an extra 100 million doses of both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines for a total of 600 million, enough to vaccinate 300 million Americans by the end of this summer.
We expect these additional 200 million doses to be delivered this summer, and that increases the total vaccine order in the United States by 50%, from 400 million order to 600 million.
The president confirming vaccine supply will ramp up as expected to 10 million doses a week and increase from there. Starting next week, another 1.4 million doses going out.
We'll ensure that states, tribes, and territories will now always have a reliable 3-week forecast on what the supply they're going to get. This is going to help make sure governors, mayors, and local leaders have greater certainty around supply so they can carry out their plans to vaccinate as many people as possible.
Late today, New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo reacting to the president's plan.
We're getting about 16 to 17% more. So at least now we can do a schedule for 3 weeks and we can schedule appointments
and start to run on an efficient basis rather than what's been going on.
Millions are already facing long waits, a maze of busy websites, and jammed phone lines.
Trying to get a COVID shot for my 93-year-old father.
Art Silk in Colorado taking to the streets to ask for help finding a vaccine for his father, a 93-year-old World War II veteran.
The pandemic is one thing, it's bad, but the way this thing is being handled is terrible.
His kids finally landing an appointment by searching online in the middle of the night. More than 23 million of the vaccines have been administered, but just under 3.5 million people have received both doses. Liz Scott in Arizona can't schedule a second dose for her parents who are over 75 with underlying health conditions.
There is nothing. I have looked every day at every location, and there is not an appointment available. This is a life or death situation. They have compromised immune systems.
And in some of the hardest hit communities, fewer vaccinations. Black and Latino Americans are nearly 3 times more likely to die of COVID-19. And new data from 16 states revealing blacks are often 2 to 3 times less likely to be vaccinated.
Many people don't have a car to drive to a high volume vaccination center. So where do they go if they don't have a personal or primary care physician? And the answer in many cases is there's nowhere to go.
President Biden also talking about pharmacies getting involved, and soon. That was reassuring late today. Stephanie with us from a mega vaccination center set up in New Jersey. That was good news to have another one of these sites, but it had to close today because they didn't have enough vaccine supply, underscoring this immediate need. And Stephanie, you've also got news tonight from the CDC coming in about the safety of children going back to school.
That's right, David. The study looked at 17 schools where masks were worn and social distancing rules were followed. Even though there was community spread of the virus at the time, researchers found that there wasn't much spread of the virus in schools when those precautions were followed. David.
That was encouraging, too. All right, Stephanie Ramos leading us off. We're also following the breaking news tonight in the impeachment of former President Trump. That trial now underway, though the actual start delayed for a couple of weeks. Tonight we have learned that Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy, who is presiding over the trial, has been taken to the hospital. What our team is learning about his condition tonight. The news comes just hours after all 100 senators were sworn in as jurors, who of course will decide whether to convict the former president. And today nearly every Republican senator voting that the trial is unconstitutional. Now, that won't stop the trial, but what does it mean for Democrats and their chances of any conviction? And what President Biden even acknowledged overnight about the chances of conviction too. Here's Rachel Scott up on the Hill again tonight.
Tonight, the senator presiding over the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump whisked from the Capitol in an ambulance. Aides to Senator Patrick Leahy telling us the senator was not feeling well, and after being examined by a doctor, was taken to a local hospital for observation out of an abundance of caution.
It came just hours after Leahy swore in his fellow lawmakers as jurors in the trial.
So help you God.
But right from the outset, it became clear there will likely not be enough votes to convict. Republican Senator Rand Paul forcing senators to vote on whether the trial itself is unconstitutional, since Trump is already out of office.
This is not a trial of a president, but of a private citizen.
Democrats and many legal experts insist the Constitution does not exempt former presidents from impeachment.
The theory that the Senate can't try former officials would amount to a constitutional get-out-of-jail-free card for any president who commits an impeachable offense.
Still today, nearly all the Republican senators, 45 of them, voted that the trial is unconstitutional. Just last week, Republican leader Mitch McConnell condemned Trump's words to the mob that stormed the Capitol.
The mob was fed lies. They were provoked by the president and other powerful people.
Mr. McConnell.
No.
But today, McConnell, too, voted that the impeachment trial should not proceed. In fact, only 5 Republican senators voted to move forward. And one of them, Susan Collins of Maine, later saying this.
I think it's pretty obvious from the vote today that it is extraordinarily unlikely that the president will be convicted. Just do the math.
Democrats need the support of 17 Republicans to convict Trump. And today's show of force, an early indicator that they just won't get there.
All right, so let's get right to Rachel back up on the Hill tonight. And Rachel, last night, even President Biden telling CNN that he believes the impeachment trial has to happen, in his words, but that he does not think the former president will be convicted. So knowing that, and you heard Senator Collins there saying, do the math, what are you hearing from Democratic leadership tonight about the reasons for moving forward? What will they tell the American people? And any additional news on Senator Leahy?
Well, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says this is about holding Donald Trump accountable. He says that his actions cannot be swept under the rug. And as for Senator Leahy, we are told tonight he is still in the hospital out of an abundance of caution, David.
All right, our congressional correspondent Rachel Scott again tonight. Rachel, thank you. We're also tracking several storms on the move at this hour, alerts in at least 25 states tonight, and we have now learned that deadly tornado in Fultondale, Alabama.
With so many Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, moving to dismiss the trial, it makes it pretty clear Mr. Trump will be acquitted next month. Now, late tonight, we are learning that 80-year-old Senator Patrick Leahy, who is presiding over the impeachment trial, was taken to an area hospital after not feeling well. We understand it is out of an abundance of caution. Nora.
All right, Chris Van Cleve with that new information. Thank you, Chris. Well, tonight, millions of Americans are in the path of dangerous weather from the West Coast to the Deep South to New England. A powerful tornado is blamed for at least one death in Alabama. And CBS's Errol Barnett is there tonight. Good evening, Errol.
Nora, dozens of people were inside this hotel behind me, some of them sleeping when the powerful tornado hit, and they had seconds to find safety. You can see a bed and some of the chairs through the open walls. The alarms inside are still beeping. Now, thankfully, no one here died, which is remarkable when you see the damage, but the same is not true elsewhere. A large tornado tearing through the city of Fultondale, Alabama overnight, ripping roofs off homes and pulverizing walls, scattering debris so high it showed up on radar. A 14-year-old boy is the first confirmed fatality, hiding with his family in a basement when it collapsed. More than a dozen others in the area were injured.
And we have recovered 6 additional occupants that were trapped.
Kim Turner was with her 2-year-old grandson, Fisher, when she heard the storm intensify.
This house was just shaking, and the electricity was out, so we were just down in the basement.
They got to safety just in time before this tree crushed their home. Tonight, she's still emotional, recounting their close call. You saved your grandson. Steve and Sue Gambler had even less time to prepare, shaken awake by the tornado ripping apart their hotel.
Get in this bathroom, and sure enough, we just went in the room and we prayed, and we felt the thing, shaking. And my next concern was, are the 2 floors above us going to fall down on top of us?
The same storm system that spawned the Alabama tornado rolled through the Midwest, dumping record-breaking snowfall in Nebraska. State troopers there responded to more than 300 weather-related accidents. Now, grandmother Kim Turner tells us she just happened to be babysitting her grandson because her daughter was at the hospital giving birth to twins prematurely. Nora, she tells us that both mom and baby are doing well, and that grandmother is counting all of her blessings tonight.
What a night that family has been through, Errol Barnett. Thank you. Well, tonight, anger is rising in Europe as governments impose new COVID restrictions and vaccines are in short supply. Now, all of this is happening as new strains of the coronavirus sweep through the continent. We get more now from CBS's Charlie DAKOTA in London.
Strict new lockdown measures triggered a backlash of violence that has spread across the Netherlands for 3 nights running. Anger at a nighttime curfew drawing rioters onto the streets. Countries across Europe are resorting to extreme measures to stem the spread of the mutant variant of the virus first identified in the UK. Far more contagious than the old coronavirus. Tonight, the UK became the first European country to surpass 100,000 deaths.
It's hard to compute the sorrow contained in that grim statistic.
Germany has now made surgical-grade masks mandatory on public transport and in stores. In rising tensions, the scramble for vaccines has taken a nationalistic tone after British-based AstraZeneca said they'd fall short of delivering millions of doses to Europe. The EU threatened to block Pfizer vaccine exports to Britain. The European Commission president demanding a return on the billions invested in vaccine development.
And now the companies must deliver. They must honor their obligations.
The EU is expected to approve the AstraZeneca vaccine this Friday. It has transformed the vaccination program here, with Britain vaccinating far more people than any other European country. It's also awaiting FDA approval in the U.S. Nora?
Charlie Daggett in London, thank you. And there's still much more news ahead right here on tonight's CBS Evening News. New rules for women in the U.S. Army, the big new changes to decades-old regulations. And caught on camera, a close encounter with a great white shark.
These will feature the latest in ag tech.
Did you?
Rolls each morning and enter to win a $2,500 seed and fertilizer package given away daily at noon by Hogemeyer and Enrich. Attendees can also win $500 in DeWalt tools given away twice daily by Baumgars. Visit SiouxFallsFarmShow.com for details. Show hours 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., 4 p.m. Friday. Admission and parking are free.
It was wrong.
He's being charged with multiple counts, including forgery and falsifying medical records. Authorities say they are now investigating whether the supervisor played any role as well. In Washington state, federal officials calling Johnny Stein a snake oil salesman for posing as a biotech expert, claiming to have a COVID vaccine and offering to inject patients for between $400 and $1,000 each. But the vaccine, claim officials, is untested, untried, and potentially unsafe. And tonight, a new hotline launched by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to crack down on vaccine deception.
You will see scam artists, and you will see fraud. I guarantee it.
David, and now the Better Business Bureau is warning that scammers are reaching out to folks via email, phone, social media, purporting to try to help them set up their vaccinations, and then they ask for personal information and money. David?
Yeah, got to be extremely careful. All right, Matt, thank you. When we come back here tonight, the new FDA warning tonight about hand sanitizers in this pandemic.
What is the stockpile right now? Where do we stand at this moment?
An update later this afternoon, as I previewed earlier.
Do you know the answer, I guess? Do we have our hands around that?
Well, certainly there is we monitor updates on a daily basis through Tiberius and multiple systems that have available information on vaccine numbers that are distributed to states, what states have received, what they have distributed, and we've been connecting all the dots to ensure we have our best understanding of where the holdups are. And we of course have that assessment, but we're continuing to dig in every day on what the issues are. Why isn't the vaccine getting out to states? What is the holdup with vaccinators? Why aren't there more vaccine sites that are getting the supply they need? But later this afternoon, he'll have more of an update on our additional vaccine supply that we'll make available to states. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Jen.
Peter row here.
Pete and Pete. Or Pete and repeat, I guess.
So the jokes could go on. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's do that. So there are some reports that FEMA is now planning to reroute up to $10 billion in money that could be used to combat COVID-19 right now, to preemptively combat climate change by building seawalls and elevating flood-prone homes. And I'm curious if there has been any thought given to waiting until COVID is behind us to do that.
Peter, I had not actually seen that report before we came out here. As you know, and I'll just repeat, the president's first priority is getting the pandemic under control and doing everything needed, putting all of the necessary resources behind that. But I'm happy to circle back with our team on that specific report.
And another question.
Wi-Fi, the freedom to connect.
I'm only organizing it to say I want to get to that because I mentioned it. Sure. But it's very important, just in my role moderating, to make sure we're clear on what happened. So thank you for what the family's going through. Before we turn to the law, Mark, what we saw on tape there, what the available evidence shows, is this proper policing?
Not at all. And it's hard to reject the claim that the occupants of the car were traumatized and victimized. But, you know, early on, even the police attempted to make the stop appear ordinary. I remember hearing their spokespersons indicate that they're trained to conduct a full-on felony stop for all suspected stolen vehicles. That's absolute nonsense. The reality is, all too often with black people, it's important to put that in, the police use reasonable force options with a mandate to use force. You know, built into policing is a wide range of discretion. And if you doubt that, look at the extraordinary restraint that was shown by the police officers at the Capitol on the 6th. If ever it was reasonable to use an escalated amount of force, that was it. But with all the video that you've seen thus far, even police officers being actively assaulted or retreating, they didn't even unholster their weapons. So as far as a police perspective, this stop was absolutely, totally avoidable and unnecessary and obviously traumatizing. Traumatizing, just as you indicated, Ari, just to watch it and the vulnerability of these young ladies, especially on the heel of what occurred with that very police department with Elijah McClain.
And so, David, now we turn, as mentioned, to this second important piece. A new law only passed after George Floyd was killed on tape, after the protests. Tell us how you were deploying it.
This law is the most sweeping civil rights law passed anywhere in the country. It's better than the federal civil rights law. The federal civil rights law, because of very conservative activist judges back in the 70s on the Supreme Court, built in various kinds of immunity for cops, known as qualified immunity, meaning if there's no case that has been previously decided where the facts are exactly the same as this case, the cops, even though they violated the Constitution, they get immunity and the case gets dismissed. The Colorado law eliminates qualified immunity. The second huge feature in the Colorado law is that if the department at the end of this case decides that the cops should have known better, but they did this anyway, these individual cops are on the hook out of their own pockets for up to $20,000 in any settlement or judgment that's rendered in this case.
I didn't realize how special it would be.
Removing the ban on transgender. We have an opportunity to look forward to 2020 and not allow our history of a dark past be the reality of the present.
You say this is a good start, so what do you want next?
Well, this is a start. The review from by the domestic policy advisor is to look into all of government and agencies to determine whether or not there are barriers we have to address. The student loan crisis that will cause some economic harm to far so many people. COVID is the most immediate thing. In order for us to get back to any semblance of progress, there needs to be a very strong COVID vaccination that's deployed, and what was inherited from our understanding was woefully under supported. So now we have an opportunity to get vaccines across the country if we apply the right logistics to the problem that we are faced with today. So there's so much opportunity over the next 4 years. It's a great start. We are only a week out, and now we are talking differently than we did just 2 weeks ago about our potential.
What is the NAACP doing, Derek, to encourage people out there to go ahead and get the vaccine and not worry about it? Because as you know, there are plenty of folks out there who are skeptical, don't want to get the shot.
Well, you know, people must understand their options, and we have some options here, and that's the beautiful thing. For far too long, almost a year now, we've had a global pandemic that lacked a federal response. And for the NAACP, we have been holding town hall meetings and ongoing engagements with our members and our communities to talk about what options are on the table. We don't want to tell people what to do, but we want them to understand clearly there are some options to keep themselves safe, to keep their families safe, and keep their neighbors safe.
You called for President Biden to create what you describe as a cabinet-level civil rights czar. Do you still want that to happen?
Well, I am encouraged with how things rolled out today. The fact that within the portfolio of the domestic policy advisor, Susan Rice, this will be a part of that portfolio. She's a very skilled and talented individual who understands how the administration works, with her power to convene agency heads I'm encouraged that we are going in the right directions as they evaluate over the next several days how structural barriers have impeded the development of far too many communities.
But if you'd rather...
Age-related macular degeneration may lead to severe
recovery process by consuming the balance of nature.
Gutters can do real damage, and the longer you go without a leaf filter, the worse the damage.
Instead, start small with Nicorette, which can lead to something big. Start stopping with Nicorette.
Worse that it was some way to take you home.
We'll see some sunshine during the day tomorrow, but more of those clouds do eventually build back into the eastern parts of the area. Warmer temperatures gradually make their return throughout the rest of the week. We'll see some more sunshine for parts of the area on Thursday. By this weekend, though, here we go again. We're tracking another chance for some snowfall. A wintry mix looking at least to start with this system. A little more mild as well as the low 30s return for both Saturday and Sunday. Early next week still staying rather comfortable, but another storm system looking to be on the way by the middle of next week, followed by, you guessed it, some more cool air, Sam.
That sun also being very elusive. Tyler, we appreciate it.
Did you know you can go to libertymutual.com to customize your car insurance so you only pay for what
the cost of inaction is. So if you look ahead, it's critical, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, that we don't get anywhere near the March cliff, which would mean the end of eviction and foreclosure moratoriums, the end of $300 additional UI assistance, the end of PPP loan applications for small businesses. And as you all know from covering what's happening in the country, people need security. And what we're trying to do now is provide that. So this package was designed not with a number in mind. We weren't trying to get a shock value, sticker value. The president relied on the advice of economists, of health experts, and others who recommended this is the size and the components that are needed now, not just to distribute the vaccine, but to provide certainty and a bridge to the American people to get to the other side. So,
if you have a number right now for how much is for vaccine distribution alone, how much you have to spend as compared to what you've asked for?
I'm happy to check with our team on that, but I will say that what we're looking ahead to is where are we in a couple of weeks and where are we in 2 months, and no one wants to be having a conversation in May about why our schools aren't open and why millions of people have been kicked off of unemployment insurance. So part of our role here is to look ahead, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with this package.
And so one other issue, the President Trump signed an executive exports of vaccines that are manufactured within the United States. That order is still in effect. First of all, what is your assessment of exactly whether drug manufacturers are able to send these vaccines overseas? Can they do that under current law? And two, will you take any action to reverse that executive order?
That's a great question, and we've talked about obviously rejoining the World Health Organization and ensuring we are a partner to the global community on this effort. Only makes us safer and the American people safer, but I'd have to check on the specific export question for you. Go ahead.
Biden's halt of the border wall is illegal, and Congress appropriated $1.3 billion a year to build another 300 miles of it, and if he doesn't carry it out, he'll be violating the same law that got Donald Trump impeached. Katie, your headline?
My headline is Special Report anchor Brett Baer wrestles an alligator while trying to recover a golf ball in Florida.
Wow. Really, that's quite a headline. Fake news, but quite a headline. I want to see the video. Yeah. I did see that one guy in Florida got the dog out of the alligator. That's good stuff.
The bar is high.
All right, panel, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Maybe, you never know. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. Fox News Primetime, hosted by Maria Bartiromo, starts in about 15 seconds. But Maria, I understand you have the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on your show tonight.
Yes, Brett, we do. We are getting reaction from Secretary Pompeo to the confirmation of Tony Blinken. So,
your favorite 2021 Toyota truck models. Toyota, let's go places.
Good evening. South Dakota lawmakers have introduced a bill that would possibly open up some information concerning Governor Kristi Noem's security expenses while traveling outside of the state. KELO Lance Tom Hansen talks with one of the sponsors of the bill who says lawmakers on both sides of the aisle just want transparency.
The description for House Bill 1089 says it will authorize the disclosure of protection and security expenditures for public officials. One of the co-sponsors says it was prompted by Governor Kristi Noem's recent travel while campaigning for former President Donald Trump. The Highway Patrol provides security for Noem when she travels, including trips outside of South Dakota. And the governor's office will not say how much that security costs. For instance, members of the Highway Patrol were with her when a man showed up with 2 weapons at a campaign event in Maine in late October. A spokesperson for the governor said troopers helped keep her out of harm's way. House Bill 1089 clarifies that the cost associated with traveling security for the governor or any other state official is not protected information. That includes meals, lodging, travel, and compensation.
And I'm one who believes that our governor is always our governor. And so when she travels, she deserves to have security with her. But as an appropriator, I also think it's an appropriate question to ask, how much does it cost?
Democratic Senator Reynold Nesseba says he and Republican Representative Taffy Howard of Rapid City came up with this bill independently. It was an aide who informed them that they were actually working on the same legislation.
And at some point, one of our staffers said, you know, there's somebody else interested in this bill. And Taffy Howard and I think were both surprised who the other person was, because we mostly disagree about an awful lot of things. So this is one where a conservative Republican and a progressive Democrat can get together to say, this is just about good government. The people of South Dakota deserve to know what it costs to provide security to our governor when she travels.
The bill has bipartisan support among its sponsors in both houses, with 5 Republicans and 1 Democrat. The bill is currently awaiting committee assignment. Tom Hansen, KELO News.
Nesseba requested the financial information from the governor's office, but was told that it would not be released. Nesseba says that under current South Dakota law, the governor can choose not to release information.
Just hours after a committee voted to reject it, the South Dakota House revived a bill that would require birth certificates to reflect biological sex. This morning, about a dozen people protested outside the state capitol against House Bill 1076. A spokesperson for the ACLU told KELO News the bill would mean transgender people could not correct the gender on their birth certificates. Representative Fred Deutsch, who introduced the bill, says it's about fixing a lack of clarity in the courts and believes the uniform application of law is in the best interest of justice. A KELOLand.com original by Ray Yost looks at the past bills introduced in the South Dakota State Legislature that have related to the state's transgender and LGBTQ population. She also looks at where South Dakota rates when it comes to equality related to the LGBTQ community. Some South Dakota lawmakers want to require doctors to try to save babies who show any signs of life after an abortion. If a baby is moving or has a heartbeat after the procedure, a doctor would need to make sure it is immediately admitted to the hospital. We did some checking, and South Dakota's only abortion clinic, Planned Parenthood in Sioux Falls, only performs abortions through 13 weeks of pregnancy. Medical experts say that is too early for a baby to survive outside the womb. A majority of babies don't survive until after 22 weeks. No doctors were invited to testify today.
If you vote no, you're denying the abortion survivor the right to live. That's what the vote no says.
This stuff gets down to elections, politics, and it's too bad. It's not right that you don't read the bills. I mean, you can have your values, I don't care. But to say when you can label, there isn't one proponent that talked about anything in this bill.
I'm here to make sure the governor's voice is heard, that we support the Born Alive bill.
A House committee voted 10-3 to move the measure forward. It now heads to the full House. If you'd like to take a look at the amended legislation,
track to meet all of our commitments, which would include 100 million doses to the U.S. By the end of June.
So, Tom, bottom line is this sounds like we're talking about enough doses to cover every American this year.
Yeah, and to do that, the White House is talking about using the Defense Production Act to require companies to help with everything from vaccines to PPE to syringes, all to get more vaccines into arms.
All right, Tom Costello tonight. Thanks. The urgency of the vaccine effort is even more critical this evening, a race against time as those new and more contagious strains of the virus spread, threatening many more Americans. Richard Engel spoke about this with Dr. Anthony Fauci.
With at least 2 viral strains now detected in the United States, I asked Dr. Anthony Fauci where we're heading.
I'm in London right now. When this strain became dominant here, bad things happen. Do you anticipate that's going to happen in the U.S.?
Now is the time for people to realize that there is a threat. And what you do when there's a threat is you look at what the countermeasures that you have against the threat. One of them is to double down on some of the very simple public health measures that we talk about. The other thing is get vaccinated.
So it sounds like we are now on a path in a race against the evolution of this virus. Are we on track to win that race?
I believe that we have the capability of doing that, but I can tell you that this is going to be difficult. This is going to be tough because viruses have extraordinary capability of evading.
Do you think we need to go onto a more warlike footing? Why aren't there refrigerated trucks driving down the streets of American towns and cities, going house to house, vaccinating people?
If we had vaccine for all 330 million people or the 285 million that you'd need to get vaccinated to get herd immunity, that would be the thing to do. But we don't.
What would you say to people who are concerned about taking the vaccine now?
The best way to prevent a virus from evolving is to stop the replication as quickly and as completely as possible. And you do that by vaccinating.
Richard Engel, NBC News, London.
I'm Miguel Almaguer. Tonight, as the U.S. tries to stop and slow the spread of more contagious variants of the virus, restrictions in some of the nation's largest and hardest hit cities are now being rolled back.
We're at a new place now, and we can start to adjust that valve and start to open up more economic activity.
Roughly half the country, including states like New York, Illinois, and California, have already confirmed cases of the highly contagious and perhaps deadlier UK strain and are now bracing for dangerous mutations from Brazil and South Africa.
I want to remind folks we're not out of the woods.
While case numbers nationally are improving, officials fear the virus variants can easily spread, triggering more hospitalizations and deaths. Still, in Los Angeles this week, where ICUs remain at full capacity, hair and nail salons were given the green light to reopen. Outdoor dining is back too, while in Chicago, indoor dining resumes.
I am concerned about some of the lifting and rolling back of precautions because some people might interpret that as a sign that they can resume life as normal, and that is absolutely not true.
Epidemiologists warn with the new variants, even brief interactions, like an outdoor chat without a mask or having a cup of coffee indoors, can increase your transmission by up to 70%. Authorities still don't know why the new variants are so contagious, so as an extra layer of protection, they recommend wearing 2 masks. And to limit your exposure, they suggest skipping that next trip to the grocery store or coffee shop.
All right, Miguel, thanks very much. The pandemic has had a profound impact on our children, cut off from friends and schools. But CDC experts said today in-person learning can resume if proper precautions are taken. For more on that, here's Kate Snow.
Leaders of the COVID response team at the CDC concluding school-related cases of COVID-19 have been reported, but there has been little evidence that schools have contributed meaningfully to increased community transmission.
In long-term care facilities and in meat processing facilities, we saw a real rapid, widespread infection across the facility and often into the community. With schools, we're not really seeing that.
It's more ammunition for those pushing to reopen schools for in-person learning. The superintendent of Clark County Schools, where Las Vegas is, says it can't happen soon enough. They lost another student over the weekend, the 19th suicide since schools went virtual only last March.
It's hard to know why someone takes their life, but do you personally think there is a link between virtual schooling and the number of suicides you've had?
I think there's a factor involved in this, yes. I believe so.
In what sense?
I think that I think the isolation. I think the kids reaching out. They don't have a vehicle in school right now.
In rural Washington state, high school junior Lily Villa says her anxiety got worse after in-person classes stopped nearly a year ago.
I'd always have someone physically next to me. I would always have someone I can physically talk to without having to dial their number or text them through Snapchat. And now I'm just with my cat in my room.
But there are heated debates over whether to return kids to classrooms, from Chicago to Atlanta to Maryland.
We want nothing more to be back in our classrooms.
The head of Maryland's teachers union says teachers won't go back on March 1st unless they're vaccinated.
Let's get back to school, but let's do it in a safe way so our teachers and our educators feel safe and parents feel safe. Putting the things in place and easing fears and not pitting people against each other.
The CDC authors say schools will still need to require face masks, increase physical distance, and do testing. They warn indoor sports could jeopardize safety, but they see a path forward for schools and a way to keep teachers and students safe. Kate Snow, NBC News.
The impeachment trial of former President Trump is moving forward, but there's already a major new signal tonight that there are not enough votes for a conviction. NBC's Peter Alexander has the latest.
Tonight, the swearing in.
So help you God.
I do, so help me God.
All 100 senators signing an oath ahead of the historic second impeachment trial of now former President Trump, set to begin February 9th. After House Democrats marched their article of impeachment to the Senate, accusing Mr. Trump of inciting the insurrection in the same building where they'll prosecute their case. President Biden now endorsing the trial, telling CNN overnight it has to happen, even as he acknowledges he does not believe Democrats will get the 17 Republican votes they need to convict Mr. Trump. And tonight, an early blow to Democrats' hopes of a conviction. Just 5 Republicans voting with them that an impeachment trial of a former president is constitutional. 45 Republicans, led by Rand Paul and including Mitch McConnell, arguing it's not.
Democrats are wasting the nation's time on a partisan vendetta against a man no longer in office. It's almost as if they have no ability to exist except in opposition to Donald Trump.
Democrats firing back.
It is clearly and certainly constitutional to hold a trial for a former official.
Still, President Biden is pressing ahead with his agenda, tonight unveiling new executive orders aimed at improving racial equity in America, addressing racially discriminatory federal housing policies, ending the federal use of private prisons, and combating xenophobia against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who've increasingly been the target of harassment during the pandemic.
And I'm not promising we can end it tomorrow, but I promise you we're going to continue to make progress to eliminate systemic racism.
And late tonight, news that the Democratic senator who was appointed to preside over the impeachment trial is now in the hospital. Patrick Leahy's office says he was not feeling well this evening and is being evaluated as a precaution. Lester?
And we wish him well. And Peter, we also learned the president spoke with Vladimir Putin today. What do we know about that call?
Yeah, that's right. The White House says President Biden raised several issues, including that massive hack of U.S. government agencies and companies that the U.S. blames on Russia. Lester?
All right, Peter, thanks. Scenes of destruction tonight near Birmingham, Alabama, after a rare January tornado swept through the...
It's very hard here where this was always going, which is that Republicans were going to stand by Donald Trump, which is where they've always stood. You know, they have sort of different versions of it. There's Jim Jordan, who will defend the president no matter what he does, and then there's kind of the Mitch McConnell version, where he might criticize the president, but ultimately will likely stand by him in this regard. You know, we've been talking about the sort of identity crisis that the Republican Party has been having. It doesn't really actually seem like they're having much of an identity crisis at all. It seems like they are still firmly with Donald Trump, either complete Trumpists or transactional Trumpists, but in the end, they always land in the same place, and that is with Donald Trump and with his base, you know, primarily because it's not clear that the Republican Party has much beyond Donald Trump. So they're very much clinging to him now. And so, you know, I don't think today's vote was very surprising, and I imagine that the final vote will look very similar.
So, with highs tomorrow only in the teens and low 20s for southeast.
Video evidence that all of us have shown and seen.
So we just showed Trump's words on the day of the insurrection and the words and actions of the mob, right? Trump defenders say, oh, well, members of the mob came in D.C. They already had the plans, you know, before Trump even spoke, so who worries about that? Just to make it clear, things that the mob said when they attacked the Capitol echoed exact things that Trump had been saying for months before the riot, and let me just play that.
We'll lose everything.
Man, we're going to lose it all. We got to get Nancy Pelosi the hell out of there.
Pelosi? Yeah, we're coming, bitch. That's treason. That's treason.
Treason! 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 This is our country.
This is our house. This is our country. This is our country.
I mean, Michael, it is essentially word for word. And he didn't just say those words once, right? He said them again and again and again, and they were heard.
The juxtaposition of what the president said and what the crowd then repeated, I think, is very, very compelling. And the question that I still need to have answered is whether then President Trump or any of the speakers on the stage that day were aware of plans already afoot to storm the Capitol. But by virtue of that vote today, you've got 45 senators locked into this view now of the unconstitutionality of a Senate trial of a former president. Presumably, they could change their mind. They could say that they were schooled by some academics, and they now realize that that was the wrong view. But it's really hard to see how the number 5 suddenly grows to the number they need.
Right, 5 to 17. If it was 5 to 7, maybe we'd be having a different conversation. But it's 5 to 17.
Right.
All right, thank you both very much. And next, the breaking news, Biden announcing a major increase in...
Do you agree with that, Secretary? Is this a message to the Biden administration? What do you think of these sanctions?
Yeah, look, I think Senator Cotton largely has that right. I think this is something they want the current Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, all the counterparts of the people that were sanctioned. They want them to be thinking about this when they're doing their calculus about decisions. I hope these officials won't take that into account. I hope they'll do the right thing, regardless of what it may mean for them personally. I don't have any doubt that the Chinese Communist Party was trying to send a message. But, Maria, it's important, too, to remember, this is part and parcel of the Chinese Communist Party's behavior. This is exactly the kind of thing they've done for an awfully long time. And for 50 years, administration after administration turned the other cheek, allowed the Chinese Communist Party to run over America. And our administration didn't do that. We responded. And I think the CCP is hoping that we will have been an anomaly, that we will have been one administration for 4 years that challenged them, that confronted them, that protected the American people. And so I think they wanted to impose sanctions on those individuals who executed our administration's policy and implemented it in a way that will cause anyone else, not just the current administration, but those who come behind, people in business, will say that there's a cost if you challenge China. We need to be prepared to walk through that fire. We need to be prepared to get it right. And we have a duty, a solemn duty, as does the next administration, to continue to tell the Chinese Communist Party we're not going to go back to what we did. The appeasement policy of the last 40, 50 years of engaging and allowing the Chinese Communist Party to take advantage of the American people and destroy millions of jobs here in America, that's just unacceptable, and the United States won't tolerate it.
Well, then why is Joe Biden banning the words China virus? I mean, in all of the things in terms of this cancel culture, now we are not allowed to say China virus, even though it originated in Wuhan. You also have Kurt Campbell, who is the Asia czar at the NSC. He was making money in China consulting. So was Tony Blinken. Is this going to get in the way? Are they going to say, well, wait a minute, China just told me if I push back on them, they're going to take away my livelihood? I mean, these are real stories. Hunter Biden and his ties to Chinese companies tied to the military. Does this get in the way of policy?
These Chinese sanctions, Maria, these Chinese threats, they are real stories. More importantly, they are real facts. Real facts that I think the American people need to know about, come to understand how it might impact American foreign policy as it relates to China. But make no mistake, I hadn't seen this banning of the term Chinese virus. I've called it the Wuhan virus almost since its inception. It began in Wuhan. It is in fact a virus that came from that place. We know that the Chinese Communist Party covered that up. We know that they disappeared doctors and journalists who wanted to write about it. We're told they couldn't. We know that, I think it's still to this date, the World Health Organization hasn't been able to see the most important elements of where this virus may have begun. These are things the State Department was talking about while I was a Secretary of State. We put out just in my last couple of weeks a few key pieces of information about some doctors who contracted something that looked like or symptomatic of something that seemed like this virus back in November of 2019. These are important things. The American people need to know them because they matter. They matter for our health, for our safety, for our economic prosperity, and for our security. And I hope, and I'm counting on this next administration to do what the American people demand of them and continue to confront the Chinese Communist Party.
What would you advise them to do right now with just the 50 votes that they've got in the Senate?
Okay, well, first of all, they got their organizing resolution, right? So they're going to, organize the Senate and name the committee chairs and move forward. And I would advise them to move ahead with the big COVID legislation in regular order. They don't have to do anything rash right now, but they should keep that threat in abeyance. And that threat is very much still there, by the way. I mean, with Manchin and Sinema, in politics, never actually means maybe, and, as you know, and it depends on the situation, it depends on the circumstances. But look, they have just watched a years-long masterclass in the use of naked power by Mitch McConnell. And he's been really good at it, and you saw what he did to Merrick Garland. You saw what he did with Amy Coney Barrett. You've seen what he did with all those judges that he pushed through. He had the power, and he used it. And Democrats who watched this for years must have learned something. That's how you run the Senate, and that's how Chuck Schumer needs to run the Senate. And, Mitch McConnell knows he lost last night. He came out with a tweet, today, a further statement saying, well, if they go ahead and, get rid of the filibuster, we're going to scorch the earth. And I guess he would, but that was, to me, that was a sign of weakness. That was a sign that, gee, I don't run this joint anymore. He does. And I think everybody should keep that reality in mind.
Oh, no, I immediately thought that, David, as soon as I saw that tweet at 9:14, I'm watching the Rachel Maddow interview, 14 minutes in, suddenly he pops up on Twitter like, so here's what I'm going to do. It's like, dude, you're admitting you lost, but you're trying to spin it, and at least some journalists picked up and went, well, okay, I guess he won. One thing I will give Republicans credit for is even when they lose, they say they won. Even when Donald Trump actually got almost nothing that he said he was going to do. He did not repeal Obamacare. He did not build a wall. But they spin it like they win it. And Democrats don't do that. Can you just explain a little bit of that DNA of, is it fear? Because look, right now the state parties are cuckoo, right? They're terrified of their own voters. They're afraid their voters will actually blow up their homes and hurt them. So the state parties are absolutely bananas. Is it because of fear that makes them so, I don't know. What is it? Explain it.
Look, I mean, Republicans have demonstrated in the last decade that they play cutthroat politics in a way that Democrats simply don't. And whether you've got to play cutthroat or not, look, the baseline to all of this we're about to see play out in the Senate and with Joe Biden, Joy, is the only way Joe Biden's agenda passes through the Congress is if Chuck Schumer does an end around the legislative filibuster by either eliminating the filibuster or by using the reconciliation process. There is no pathway to getting 60 votes in the Senate for Joe Biden's agenda. So Schumer and the Democrats need to accept that and then make the political calculus that they think makes the most sense for them. And that political calculus is an interesting one. Did Democrats sweep everything based on an ideological platform, or was there a segment that was just trying to get rid of Donald Trump? And even if it wasn't a full ideological platform, is it worth it to move through Democratic priorities and then test those priorities at the ballot box the next time? You can look at the Affordable Care Act as an example of Democrats pushing through something that some would make the case ultimately lost in the Congress in 2010, but I think every Democrat would probably say it was worth it. We got it done. Schumer needs to make the calculation. What is it worth?
We'll try to do the best we can with it.
USD will play the first of 4 straight road games at SDSU on Friday, February 5th. The USD men's games with Omaha are still on a schedule. We'll hear
approximately 100,000 doses for the following weeks. Still, just a small step in the ramp up, and we certainly hope that there's several times that as level of dose as we get into March. But we're excited to get it out because this is life-saving and it's about ending the pandemic.
You're all finding ways to keep moving, and at Fidelity you'll
structural issues. So when you're looking for someone to address
Governor Cuomo here in New York, Governor Hogan in Maryland, they say this increase isn't anywhere near enough. It sounds like you're sort of saying the same thing. You're just looking at it as a glass half full.
Right. It's going to take an awfully long time at these levels to end the pandemic. So this is important because we can protect our most vulnerable sooner. Currently in Colorado, we're rapidly making our way through people age 70 and up, and then we'll go down to 65 soon. And 3/4 of our deaths are people in that cohort. But so we can really reduce deaths by 3/4. But to be able to end the pandemic, you need to get up to about 60–70% vaccinated. And it's going to take a very long period of time at these levels. So I'm really hopeful that that quantity ramps up into March and April.
So have they given you have you had any conversations with them where because you're saying you have visibility here for 3 weeks. Look, that's better than no visibility or getting a cut. I understand that, but 3 weeks is not a lot of visibility. Do you have concern about that, or do you think that's then going to be ratcheted up more? I mean, what's your sense here?
It's more visibility than we've ever had before. We were literally finding out on a Thursday or Friday what we were getting the following Monday. And now we're getting the sense that the numbers are increasing and they're going to be predictable for a few weeks. So I think that this is where it is right now. I think hopefully as the Biden administration digs in, they'll get a better sense of exactly what it's going to look like in mid-late February and March and April. I hope that it ramps up quickly. I also hope that there's additional effective vaccines, perhaps Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca, already approved in parts of the world, AstraZeneca in the United Kingdom. If that becomes available here, they'll further increase supply.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a dramatic change in the situation, and obviously a single-dose vaccine in the case of Johnson & Johnson. I wanted to ask you about a CDC paper today. You know, it's a new study that came out in a CDC journal, and it fits with every other study about schools that we have seen. But what it says is that the virus spread that you see in crowded offices or long-term care facilities simply has not been reported in schools, that you're just not seeing the transmission. Do you believe all schools in Colorado should reopen immediately?
Yeah, that's consistent with everything we've seen here. So we have the majority of our school districts have been in person all year long. And we have seen no increase of the virus in the areas where the schools have been fully in compared to areas of our state, including some of our cities, where schools have not been in session. So with the precautions that we're taking, right, it's not going back to school like it was last year or the year before. This is mask wearing, this is protecting cohorts, this is using ventilation and distancing where possible. Our state is supplying free medical grade masks to teachers. We're providing two tests per week to every educator. So all of these things combined make schools one of the safer places that you can be during this pandemic.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see more schools around the country follow that lead then. Governor, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, next. So you just heard the governor on what he needs in his state for vaccines. So what is the administration's response? President Biden's chief of staff is my guest, and CNN uncovering disturbing comments and posts from Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Comments that show that she indicated support for executing people, Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi.
Hey, Dad, what if I...
For the underdog.
There's a bag full of hope. Kevin Tibble's NBC News, Vernon Hills, Illinois.
People like Sue kind of make you feel like everything's going to be okay. That's Nightly News for this Tuesday. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
Explain to me how you're so upbeat.
I choose to be happy.
I choose to be happy. We're not going to be weird, right?
You're being weird right now. I'm very excited to see what else you have in store.
Alert, alert. Good.
Our focus, and so we got everything in the right place. We put the building blocks in place so that we would continue to be the most superior military in the world, capable of defeating any military that was needed, whether that was cyber threats or threats to satellites or more conventional threats, that we would have the capacity to do that. I'm confident that we still can, but make no mistake about it. The Chinese Communist Party and its military, the People's Liberation Army, is doing its utmost to be a rival to the United States military.
Well, what about Russia? G7 ministers concerned with jailing of Russian protesters. The Biden administration says it wants a new arms control agreement with Russia. We all know that Russia cheats. Is this a bow to Vladimir Putin?
Well, we worked hard to try and get an arms agreement with the Russians, too, and frankly got close. We got the Russians to agree to freeze their nuclear weapon systems for the first time. We ultimately couldn't get that done because we couldn't get them to permit us to verify that commitment in a way that would have been important. I hope the next administration will continue to push in this direction. If we can reduce nuclear risk in the world, that is certainly a good thing. But make no mistake about it, we were as tough on Russia as any administration. We sanctioned dozens and dozens and dozens of officials. We worked hard to make sure that we tried to convince Putin that he had to behave in a way that was consistent with global standards. We didn't always succeed at that, but there was no doubt that the United States stood ready to protect the American people from that threat, as well as the threat from the Chinese Communist Party.
Secretary, final question here. What are your plans? A lot of Trump supporters feel very good about the way you handled yourself. You were the last one out the door. You stuck with President Trump until the end. Will you run in 2024?
Goodness, Maria, that's a long way off. I'm still trying to figure out how to get settled and move on to the next thing. The work that we did, the mission that we were on was important. I believe that with all my heart. We did a good turn for the American people to protect them and create the conditions for their prosperity by putting America first. I hope to continue to be a part of that. I don't know precisely what my role will be in that, but I'm committed to continuing that effort.
Well, that is not a no, and I will take it. Secretary, it is good to see you tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Maria. So
we'll see you soon. Secretary. And coming up next, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley is here. Wait till you see what he has to say about the new efforts to blacklist him. Then his reaction to some on the left calling for him to be kicked out of the Senate when we come back.
Really? I'm joined now by Senator Alex Padilla of California, who will consider the case against the former president. And Senator, I feel like, you know, Senator Rubio is just one example that I could pull from, but it seems to me that they have flipped the Benghazi standard on its head for the former president. How do you think that this is going to be a legitimate, real trial, or do you think Republicans have already made up their mind to let the former president off the hook?
So, look, Joe, I think you bring up a great point, right? Republicans can't have it both ways. They're in this job to execute the oath of office that we've all sworn to do, to uphold the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And while, yes, we have a formal trial ahead of us, the whole nation, the whole world saw in real time on television the insurrection, the violent insurrection, the deadly insurrection in our nation's capital, absolutely instigated by Donald Trump and his neighbors.
You know, what's really sort of madness, if you think about it, is that the people who will be voting, including yourself, sir, were the victims of this attack. The former president sent a riotous mob into the Capitol to hurt people, some of them to maybe do worse. They had a noose. They had a hangman's noose and were chanting, "Where's Mike Pence? Produce Mike Pence." They were demanding to have Nancy Pelosi. They were going to hurt people, if not, and 5 people died. I wonder if you, in conversations with, other than the 5 who voted to go forward today, only 5 of them could see their way through to say that it should even happen a trial. When they talk to you outside of these 5, do you think that your fellow members are too afraid of their own constituents to go forward, or that they ideologically think it's okay for the former president to have tried to overthrow the election?
Look, honestly and sadly, it's a mix. Right? Is it facing a constituency? Is it standing up to the Trump base within the Republican Party? I don't know, but let me make it one better, Joy. It's not just that the members of the Senate, along with the House members that voted on the impeachment in the last couple of weeks, are the victims of what happened on January 6th. The trial itself is happening at the scene of the crime. If there's any doubt, just look outside the window. because the physical impact of January 6th is still there.
Well, yeah, and when I went in to do an interview with the speaker, you could still feel it, right? There are windows that are still broken. It's shocking to me that this is going to take place, as you said, at the scene of the crime. Do you think, in your view, is it right that two of the people aren't victims? Two of them are perpetrators, to be honest. Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz participated in what happened. Do you think that they should be allowed to sit through this trial, or do you think they should be expelled or censured?
Look, I absolutely have been saying from the beginning, nobody is above the law. Donald Trump must be held accountable, but it does not end with him. He's had far too many enablers, both in the White House while he was there and throughout his administration, and including the two members of the United States Senate that he just named. So there must be consequences all around.
And you're newer to the United States Senate. As you just walk around and deal with these senators, do you get the sense that there is an equal agreement between the two parties on the importance of democracy?
I certainly don't sense that, not in the last couple of weeks as the conversation has been around impeachment. But look at the last 4 years, and frankly, a lot longer than that when you talk about fundamental faith in our democratic institutions. Is our democracy inclusive and representative or not? You look at the voter suppression activity that took place, not just in the 2020 cycle, but over the course of our nation's history, and the tactics that Republican leaders are taking yet again in state after state across America. So sadly, Joy, the answer is no, which means it's both my opportunity and responsibility, right, as a face of California, representing so many other constituencies in California and throughout the nation, to be the physical representation in the United States Senate, to say, no, this is our country too, and we deserve a seat at the leadership table. It's one of the many, many things that incited so many people on January 6th. They want to have a debate as to who's an American, and this is a chance for our democracy to show its resilience.
Senator Alex Padilla, who I cannot believe is the first Latino United States Senator from California. Congratulations on that. It has been a long time coming, sir, and I think the America's better for having you there. Thank you very much. And up next, the strategy for this impeachment.
Get home. Because home is where the fun is.
I've looked at numbers for like February, March, April, and it looks like we're going to have a baby boom.
The Carl family is expecting their baby the end of March.
So she's kind of the start of the baby boom, yeah.
With your Avera Medical Minute, Beth Warden, Dakota News Now.
If an expectant mom gets COVID-19 or receives the vaccine, she can pass antibodies on to her baby through breastfeeding. For more information on pregnancy care, be sure to go to avera.org. Pretty busy night of high school basketball this evening. Mr. Ovenden will be along with plenty of highlights. That's next in Dakota News Now Sports.
The riot, but investigators are signaling that there could be a lot more, like up to 300 or so?
Yeah, look, yeah, they have, right now there are about 400 subjects who are already, they already have open investigations done. And 150 people we know already are facing charges. And one of the things we heard from Michael Sherwin, who's the acting U.S. attorney here in D.C., he said, look, if you were inside or even if you were outside of the Capitol, if you committed a crime, they are going to charge you. So it doesn't matter whether you went in, if you were on the premises, and they can prove that you committed a crime, they are going to charge you. So they're not worried about overwhelming the court system. They are going to try to bring these people. And they mentioned that there were over 200,000 digital media tips that have been brought in. And the funniest, one of the most interesting things to me is that people's family members, their friends are turning them in. These are average Americans who are outraged by what happened on January 6th, and they are doing the right thing.
We saw Chris had on the son of one of them who turned his own dad in. And investigators are asking the public for tips still.
Right. The big priority is to try and find the people, the persons, the group, is one of the suspicions that were behind the two pipe bombs. One was found at the RNC building, another one at the DNC building. This is the way just outside of the Capitol, Don, and you can see right there some of the pictures that they've been sharing. So far, it appears that has not yielded any solid leads. They've increased the reward to $75,000. And Don, here's the thing. they've been doing all of the regular things that they do, which is to look for cell phone data, to try to look at surveillance video. None of that has yielded anything, and it's scary because there's somebody out there who planted these bombs. They were real bombs, and they're still out there. And one of the concerns that the investigators have is that this was a plot to essentially draw police away from the Capitol while the insurrection was happening. So there was something here. There was a greater planning. And again, that's what they're trying to get to the bottom of. You mentioned sedition, conspiracy. That's one of the things that they're building towards because they believe that there are multiple groups that were working together perhaps that day to try to breach the Capitol and carry this attack out.
Hey, Evan Perez.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. It's
Thank
always
you.
a pleasure. Good to see you. I'll see you soon. Good information.
Sure.
Republicans in Washington battling over control of the direction of their party. And wait until you see what's happening with the GOP in states like Texas and Arizona.
Is mealtime a struggle?
In Class AA. The Warriors brought a perfect record to the floor tonight. They tried to keep it that way. Second quarter, watch this. I love these kind of plays. Taj Tuballs is going to rip the rim down on the fast break in the second quarter. Later on for Brandon Valley, the inbounds play, it's Peyton Teachin with a basket. It's 27-24 in favor of Washington. But the Warriors get the ball to Eli Williams. Eli rips home a three from the top of the key, and later it's going to be Tuballs for the lay-in. Craig Nelson loving that. His team wins 69-62 in a very good game. Another top-ranked team, the Comets of Boyden Hull, were at Rock Valley to play against the guys they are teammates with in high school football. Boyden Hull won by 18 earlier. Tanner Tieslaw with 23 points. Comets up 2. This was a great game back and forth. Landon Van Kekricks nails the three, and the Rockets of Rock Valley go up by a point. Boyden Hull comes right back. Dayton Brunsting with a nice move inside the hook shot. Comets by 1. Rock Valley counter punches. Van Kekricks again. Nice shot off the dribble. Rockets take the lead by 1. But Brunsting hits a tough layup here, and the Comets stay undefeated. They won 22 straight. They win it in overtime, 70-69. Great game in Rock Valley. Last night, the 4th-ranked Sioux Falls Christian girls knocked off West Central on their home floor. Tonight, the boys trying to do the same thing against arch rival T. Kate Ellingson, who was on the cover of our football pigskin preview, and T goes up 12-1 to start the game. Noah Van Donkersgood was really good. He had 26 points with a basket inside. T on the other end, drive, kick out to Cale Lundeen, corner 3. He had 21 points. So did Colbeck. Sioux Falls Christian, much of the same. Xavier Van Beek, 3 of his 17, and the Chargers win it 63-58. We had some great basketball tonight. Last night was a big game in Canastota for head coach Pat Jolly as his Hawks beat Ethan 54-46. It was career victory number 400 for the 64-year-old head coach, and so far he is not slowing down one bit, and why should he? They got a new gym that's being built, although I'm kind of sad to see this one go. It's just a great venue for high school basketball. Seems very likely to return for a whole lot more fun after this year, and that's good news for boys basketball fans in Canastota.
I've been in it, I've been in it for a long time. I coached all 4 of my sons, and then I've continued after that, but I still have no trouble getting motivated to go to practice. I still enjoy practice. I enjoy scouting. I enjoy putting game plans together. And so I've always said I would quit when it ever got to if I ever got to a point where I found it difficult to want to get motivated, but I look forward to the start of the season every year.
The Hawks are ranked 4th in this week's Class B poll with 10 wins and 11 starts before tonight's game at Chester, which they won, so it looks like Pat's going to be adding to that win total quite a bit for the rest of the year. On the girls' hoops, the new top-ranked team in AA is Aberdeen, and the Golden Eagles 10-0 under their legendary, almost retired head coach Don Seiler. Remington Price had 14 points for Pierre. Second half now, it's Laney Stevens for 3. Governors wouldn't go away. They led by 2 points at halftime. Kenzie Gronlund gets the ball in close, goes off the hoop, off the glass. She's fouled. Do we have an upset? Melanie Jacobs says no. She knocks down the three-pointer. And along two here by Abby Kopecki as the Golden Eagles go to 11-0 for the big win tonight. Final score 61-50. Don't have that Mitchell and Roosevelt score. Here's all the rest from ranked teams. Watertown, West Central, 70.
GOP establishment want the party to move beyond him, especially now that he has been impeached for a second time. But other Republicans at the state level are still all in for Trump, and they are angry at members of the GOP who supported impeaching him. More on this growing rift in the party from CNN's Kyung Law.
This is the storming of a Capitol you may not have seen. Rioters breached the Oregon State Capitol and assaulted police less than a month before this. The insurrection in Washington, D.C. As former President Donald Trump faces a second impeachment trial charged for his role in inciting the deadly D.C. riot.
It was a sham impeachment, just like the first one.
The Oregon Republican Party defiantly defends Trump.
Patriots are not going away. The president's not going away.
The state party passed a resolution condemning 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach Trump, calling it a betrayal. Then dived into this conspiratorial lie about the insurrection, that there is growing evidence that the violence at the Capitol was a false flag operation designed to discredit President Trump.
This is a time for choosing, but it's a time for choosing what you really believe and want to stand for, and not for just giving lip service to being a Republican.
That's not helping to win over more Republicans, says Oregon Republican State Representative David Brock Smith.
Extremism on either side only benefits a small minority, and it's not the majority of the constituents that we represent.
Choosing to side with the far-right fringe or not, that's the battle at the state party level. In Texas, the GOP continues to use the slogan, "We are the storm," the same slogan used by followers of the QAnon conspiracy. The Texas Republicans deny that connection. In Hawaii, a top GOP official resigned from his post after he tweeted sympathy for QAnon followers from the state party account. He later called it an error in judgment.
It'll be the Trump Republican Party.
In Arizona, it's open warfare among Republicans. These women believe the baseless claims peddled by Trump.
This election was stolen. Trump won, I think, by a landslide. I will be with him wherever he goes, however he goes.
The state party shows no sign of moving away from Trump. Members re-elected a fervent Trump follower as their chairwoman, despite Democrats flipping the state blue in 2020. Arizona Republican Party members don't seem to care.
Unification at what cost? Okay, selling out America? I can't do that.
There will be a price, warn establishment Republicans.
It really is driving normal, regular, rational people from the Republican Party, and we can't afford to lose many more.
And that's more than just a fear that the former senator is talking about. There are real numbers behind this. The Arizona Secretary of State's office tells CNN that 9,944 registered Republicans, that's almost 10,000 of them, have officially switched their party registration since the U.S. Capitol riots. Establishment Republicans here in Arizona say that's not just a warning, that is a blaring siren that something is very wrong. Don?
Kyung Law, thank you so much. I want to bring in CNN's political commentator, Anna Navarro. Anna, hello to you. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it. So you heard Kyung's report there. How far does the GOP go? How long do they stay on this path before, as former Republican Senator Jeff Flake puts it, normal, regular, rational people move away from the Republican Party?
I don't have the answer to that, but I can tell you that the longer they hold on to Donald Trump, the longer they are in fear of Donald Trump, the longer they are complicit with Donald Trump, the longer they let Donald Trump get away with abuses of power and crime that he committed while president, the longer this will last. There are people, there are regular people who watch state media, who listen to their congresspeople, who trust their congresspeople, who absolutely believe these things. And so it becomes very difficult to argue with somebody that there is not a deep state being run by a bunch of celebrities and people who are molesting children. It sounds so insane that it's almost difficult to argue against it. But look, Don, it's going to go on. This level of fringe is going to go on as long as Republicans continue giving Donald Trump a pass and being in fear of him. He is controlling them right now.
You know, nearly 10,000 Republicans have requested to change their party registration from Republican to Independent, Democrat, or Libertarian since that Capitol riot. That's according to Arizona Secretary of State's office. Major companies continue to say that they won't donate money to people who enable the insurrection by voting to overturn the election results. Do any of the Republicans care about these things?
I think the elected Republicans care about staying elected. I think that's why people like Rob Portman are choosing not to run, because they don't have the stomach for it. Look, you know, it takes some reckoning. It takes some introspection and looking inside of yourself and asking, what did I do the last 4 years that I enabled this man to be able to incite a mob to raid the Capitol and commit domestic terrorism? And so I think a lot of people in elected office don't want to look at themselves in the mirror and accept their complicity, accept their culpability, accept their responsibility. And until there is accountability, and unless there is accountability and responsibility taken for what Republicans in elected office have done to embolden these actions that Donald Trump took that culminated on January 6th, they can't move on, right? They can't move on. It takes a level of humility and self-introspection to realize, because I was silent so often, because I looked the other way, because I pretended not to read the tweet, because I pretended not to hear him say there are good people on both sides, because I didn't want to blame him for inspiring a white supremacist to go hunt down Latinos in El Paso, because I gave him a pass for so long, it led to what happened on January 6th. And so they don't want to do that. They don't want to blame themselves and for what their part has been in this. And so they continue pretending that that this is normal. That's why they voted the way they voted today, with the exception of the 5 Republicans on process. Because, Don, they don't want their names to go down on the wrong side of history. And history is going to judge Republicans who have enabled and been part of this incredibly harshly. And it's not going to be in 100 years. It's going to be in a few years. Their children are going to ask, what did you do about the day that a rabid mob raided the Capitol and led to the death of people? What did you do? And they're going to have to look down in shame. And I just don't think they can accept that.
Yeah. Ana Navarro, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And
an old false dichotomy. If something is evil, it's evil. If you personally believe it's evil, how can you support it publicly if you know it's evil? It's a false dichotomy. We're talking about things that are not religion-specific, denominational-specific. These are not doctrines that we receive from the Bible or ages of church teaching. These are things that are in the natural order. We just know that killing is wrong. You don't need enlightenment of faith to know that. You can know that by your reason alone. Killing is wrong. Stealing is wrong. Calumny is wrong. So it's not something that's a matter of religious belief. Our church teaching reinforces it and champions it, gives us deeper insight into human dignity, but it's not something that's denominationally specific. And we saw how faith leaders have led great causes of rights in the past, the abolitionists in the 19th century, and then it was faith leaders who led the civil rights movement in the 1950s into the 1960s. So again, these aren't things that are denominationally specific. They're matters of justice that, of course, faith leaders champion because they're emphasized with the values of our faith.
And when you talk about respect for life and viewing every person as created in the image of God. It calls on us to do a lot of things, to solve a lot of wounds and to reconcile and to treat those who need our help most, who are vulnerable at every stage. So, Archbishop, thank you for your time. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Twitter is planning to unleash a community of bird watchers. These are going to be your fellow neighbors, keeping an eye on your tweets. Do you care? Should you? That's next.
Fake that they're going to be able to run for president in 2024 off the face of 5 dead people and undermining this entire country.
We've agreed to a pause on the revolution. Both of these gentlemen have agreed to stay with us so I can fit in a break. When we come back, so many Republican senators without the conviction to convict.
Who is USAA made for?
Senate President pro tempore, Pat Leahy of Vermont.
The nuggets on your bed and then uncover. Her guest made history by participating in the most horrific.
Back on you. He actually ran also on being a unifier, on being a healer. He won in the primaries by being a moderate. He won the general election by saying he was going to unify us. Isn't that his most important task?
I think that's an interesting question of what he meant by unity. So I've spoken to him during the campaign and watched what he said on this very closely. And he's always said that he wants to bring Americans together and he wants to try to win Republican support for his proposals. But he never said, and he was always very careful never to say, that he wouldn't do what was necessary if he couldn't get that support. There's the things you try and then the things you adopt if you have to. I think as a macro question about American politics, this issue of how do we, unity I think is a very high goal to reach, but how do we engage people more productively in American politics? How do we make sure our disagreements are constructive? How do we make sure people feel politics is a more useful force in their lives? And that's where I think making certain that when the public chooses new leadership, they get different results actually becomes really important. Unity is not about what 15 people in Washington decide it is. Unity is not about 7 Republican senators and 7 Democratic senators having lunch together. In fact, a lot of things that seem to bring elite unity actually end up bringing public fracture because the public doesn't get what they want. If a bunch of senators come together and cut the COVID relief bill in half and 5 million more people end up suffering because of that, that's not going to unify the nation. That's going to enrage people, and properly so. So I think that in the long history of not just American politics, but international politics, you tend to see the most unifying effects coming from successful governance. And so that's my argument to the Biden administration in my New York Times piece, is the sole thing that's going to matter, or the thing they can control that is going to matter, is did they help people? Did they help people fast enough for people to feel it by the next election, and visibly enough for people to know that it came from the government?
The group of centrist senators, Republicans and Democrats, a few of them, that have been discussing this week with the White House the COVID relief bill, said $1,400 checks sent out to a widespread group of Americans is not the most efficient or best way to do it. Leave aside the politics for a second. Tell me, policy-wise, should we send out $1,400 checks to most Americans?
I think we should, but for a specific reason. I think that this is an unbelievably painful period, and cash transfers are a good way to help people get through it. I think it's very, very important to recognize that what we're doing here is not simply stimulating the economy. This is not like 2009, where the issue is we have a lot of people who are idle, a lot of factories that are idle, and we want to put them all back to work. This is a period where we're trying to give people a bridge to get through accepting public health advice that is going to require them to stay out of the economy for an extended period of time. And to have that policy be more universalistic, although not fully universal, this only goes up to about $75,000 in income, and to have it be much simpler to administer, that is worth some trade-off in targeting. There tends to be a fetishization of trying to get things exactly right through complex means testing and proposals, but then the issue is they're hard to administer, and a lot of people who should get them don't, and also they don't build political support for themselves. I think one thing we have seen in recent years in place, we need you.
What is the chance the old campaigner, the editor-in-chief of American Nihilist magazine, Mitch McConnell, would vote to convict at this point?
It's next to nil, and I don't know. I don't know why anyone who observed Mitch McConnell would be surprised that he and Donald Trump didn't talk. They were a very Brady-Belichick relationship. Look, we're here just to win wings. We're here just to get judges. We're actually not friends, right? And now they're going to go off and try and do whatever their separate careers are going to be. Mitch McConnell will say all the nice things. He'll say that Donald Trump provoked things but didn't incite things. But under no circumstances is he even remotely interested in trying to hold President Trump accountable. That is not in his ideology, and that's not what he's going to ask anybody in his caucus to do. But what I think is important also to remember is by not having any communication with the president, it also indicates something that I think everybody needs to understand about the Republican Party. They weren't behaving this way just because of Donald Trump. It's like the, Dumbo and the feather, right? The feather wasn't making Dumbo fly. It was always within him. The Republicans were always a white nationalist party. That's what they decided that they were going to sell out to. So Donald Trump being gone or not communicating with McConnell doesn't mean they're not going to keep the same agenda. It just means they're not going to have somebody tweeting to 1 million bots every week to justify what they're doing.
I see your Brady mention, and I'll raise you one, Patrick Mahomes. Hey, Steve, this would have been the morning Rob Portman, newly fortified with the truth serum of retirement, conjured up the courage, but no, he maintains his 90% voting record. He voted on Trump's side today. Do you think we in the news media and chattering class were giving members of the Senate too much credit for how quickly they might migrate away from Donald Trump? Because this is a whole new kind of criminal cognitive dissonance, Steve. Some of these guys are going to sit here at this trial at desks that were looted and defiled, obviously in a chamber that was taken over, and to get to the chamber, they will walk past damage.
We have a crisis of cowardice in this country, but let's look at the two elements in the United States Senate, because they're two of the elements that always surround and make possible any autocratic movement. We have two types of people in there. We have the accomplices. We have the cynical elites, Polly, Cruz, Stanford, Yale, Harvard, professorships at Oxford, a clerkship to the Chief Justice of the United States. They know that the election was free, fair, and legitimate. They know that this is all a lie, but they are cynical and arrogant enough to believe that they can ride the tiger, that they can advantage themselves by going into business with the people that they have contempt for, the people outside who stormed the Capitol. And then there's the sheep, the people who just go along to get along, the accommodationists. That's what Rob Portman is, one foot in front of the other. He would be a lovely person to live next door to. He'd be a great guy for your kids to wave to. He'd be great to have an eye on the neighborhood. But he's a terrible United States Senator because he doesn't understand that sometimes his job requires conflict. And the conflict that it requires is to stand up and to assert his faithfulness and fidelity to the Constitution of the United States, which was attacked. It was attacked by that mob that was incited by Hawley and Cruz. There is no moving on from this. The people's government was attacked. That night, 147 of them rose. If they succeeded, if that vote had passed, what would have happened? The 244-year-old American Republic would have fallen. If they had succeeded, even at the height of Jim Crow, there was never a federal action to take away black votes, to nullify them from states that had certified a result. We're in new territory with all of this. And so there will be accountability. By the end of the month, 1,000 people will have been arrested by federal law enforcement authorities. And there will ultimately, as the facts become clear, be accountability for the political leadership of the country that also incited this. Some of them are U.S. senators, some of them are House members, but for sure, we're not moving on as a country until there's accountability for one of the worst crimes in the history of the country.
Steve Schmidt, Jason Johnson, our thanks to two longtime friends of our broadcast. Thanks, gentlemen. Coming up for us, what's being called America's obligation in the costly mission, nothing short of saving the world from this pandemic when we come back. Interesting story.
I'm a Democratic member of Congress to specifically have the FBI investigate Parler. There are now a number of Republicans coming forward saying, okay, if the FBI is going to do that, you have to look at the role that any conversations on Facebook or Twitter or other places were happening. Why just subject one particular outlet, one particular place of conversation to an FBI investigation and not others? Or should they all be investigated?
Well, of course, this is a sham. The entire sham is that by identifying one scapegoat, when the same kind of thing was happening on all of these social media companies equally, what we're seeing is a suppression of competition in the ideological marketplace. So Congress, I think, has got it wrong, including conservatives in Congress, when they're focused on antitrust law. Because antitrust is all about consumer price competition in the marketplace, protecting consumers from price gouging. That's why these CEOs ran circles around the congressman at the antitrust hearings last August. The real issue is actually a monopoly on ideas. Not a pricing cartel, but an ideological cartel. And when they had somebody who tried to defect from that ideological cartel, and that was Parler, they punished the defector. That's what a cartel does. And what we have from the 20th century antitrust law doctrines doesn't meet the moment for what the real challenge is in Silicon Valley today, which is that ideological cartel.
Okay. Vivek, we hope you'll come back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
President Biden offering $4 billion to aid Central American countries, but what happened to the billions we've already sent? Well, we've investigated, and we'll tell you next.
To throw the first stone here, I mean, we know that it's saved.
With also a discomfort in terms of how power is wielded. And so in some states where there's actually a lot of progressive control, what they end up doing is creating both. You both have sort of unified democratic control of the state, but on the other hand, these states' actual governance structure is chock full of veto points. All these different neighborhood associations and little councils and boards of supervisors and 100 other ways. And the way that a lot of these things were constructed was, the hope was this would make sure that those in power could not act without hearing those who would be affected. It's a very good idea. It's a good progressive idea. But when you create too many of them, well, the people who show up, number one, are very unrepresented groups. You have people who, don't want anything built near their home because it might ruin their view. Well, on the other hand, the people who would be helped by that new apartment building being built can't actually, or don't actually know to come to that meeting because they don't live there yet. So it creates a very, very, very heavy status quo bias. It ends up really advantaging those who already live in a place rather than those who need to live in a place. On top of that, something I think about with California sometimes, you've probably heard the old line that Americans are symbolically conservative and operationally liberal. That means when you ask them about questions of philosophy, should the government be big or small, what is best done by the private sector or by the public, they sound pretty conservative. And then when you ask them about specific issues in policy, they sound quite liberal. They do want to have more government-provided health insurance, a higher minimum wage, higher taxes on the rich, etc. I have a theory that California has become increasingly symbolically progressive but operationally conservative. That whenever it comes to a big symbolic issue, fighting the Trump administration in courts, or pushing back against this or that outrage that is on social media, or making sure that every elected official roughly will say Black Lives Matter, it's very, very liberal on those issues. But then when it becomes something about actually changing how we live, we need to build housing right here near you so other people can live here. We need to build a train station right here near you so we can have reasonable mass transit. We need to actually give out vaccines quickly, even if that might mean some people end up somehow cutting in line. They become very operationally conservative. California does not like to change what is actually happening in it. It just likes to signal how progressive it is to the rest of the country. And that's a pretty bad, that in my view is a pretty bad equilibrium to be in. So if the California government is listening to me on this, like how we're running things here is a problem, and it's a problem because you're not going to have people in the long run trusting blue government at the federal level either if they don't see it working out well at the state level.
Something weird.
Extended release melatonin.
This is the Army National Guard.
Our plan was we tested every single child, every single staff member and faculty member, and then based on those numbers, we determined what was going to happen going forward. And it was, in a community of really quite high prevalence of new infections per day, one of the highest in the state of Massachusetts. Not a single positive case in the entire school.
Wow. So the CDC is watching 4 COVID variants right now that seem to be more transmissible. What does this mean for our everyday lives? Should we change our behavior when we're going out in public, like even to the grocery store?
Not yet. I mean, we've really got to focus on the variant that's kicking our backside right now. I mean, we're in trouble right now with the one that we've got. We've turned a bit of the corner, but the one that we have here is the one that we need to focus our attention on right now. We do need to be mindful that we are in a race at the moment between vaccination and the new variant, especially the one that originated in the United Kingdom. So, you know, the important thing to think of, though, is the measures that we took to keep ourselves safe with the current variant are the same measures we need to put in place to keep ourselves safe from the new variant. We just need to do them a little bit better. A better fitting mask, wearing it more often, be mindful of going inside and in close spaces with lots of people. Just be a little bit more mindful than what we were. But it's not time to worry in the future. We need to focus on right now.
Yeah. So, I'm not, I'm concerned when I'm going out, right? But if, like, the masks give me some degree of comfort. You heard what Dr. Fauci says. He suggested wearing 2 masks, and I've done that before. That is more effective in stopping the spread. Other experts say that we should be wearing K95 masks in public. Your thoughts on that quickly, please.
Yeah, so masks are important. The fit is more important than the mask itself. And when you wear a mask, even a KN95, and you don't have it hugging over the nose or around your cheek, air is just going to shoot out through the path of least resistance. So wearing 2 masks is not necessarily about the filtration of 2 masks. It's about one mask really hugging the other mask onto your face to make more of your breath go through the mask, and on your inhalation, the breath goes through the mask. So that's where 2 masks comes in. It gets a tighter seal on your face.
Look, it's been so cold here. I'm happily wearing 2 masks. Keeps me warm. Thank you, Aaron Bromwich, and I'm glad your kids are all safe, and you are as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on tonight.
And thank you for watching, everyone. Be safe out there. Stay warm.
Fraud protection. Discover something brighter.
It is a long-term problem. William Lajeunesse, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Most watched, most trusted, most grateful that you spent part of your evening with us. Good night for now from Washington. I'm Shannon Green.
We're all finding ways to keep moving. And at Fidelity, you'll get planning and advice to help you prepare for the future without sacrificing what's most important to you today. Because with then easily and
tortilla with some clickbait beans.
Hey, you look familiar. What is your name? Where are you? Tomorrow night, Naomi Watts and Leslie Odom Jr. will join us. And on Thursday, Michelle Pfeiffer, George Lopez, and music from Arlo Park. So
you're watching PBS. Octopuses, the closest we'll get to an alien on Earth. But is a connection possible?
you look at them and you feel like they're looking back.